Ladies and gentlemen, never let it be said that politics in South Africa is boring, because at the moment, South African politics is anything but boring. There's so much to talk about that actually condensing it all into a short video is becoming really problematic. But before I get onto the video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. And for all of those who moan about me using my hands while I'm talking, it stops me from actually playing with the computer while I'm making a video. So yeah, just bear with it. Anyway, let's get on to the videos of today. The first is the story of Mantashe and Cyril Ramaphosa. Have they been arrested? And the answer is no, they haven't. Now, these claims have been made via AI-generated YouTube videos and, well, Facebook. And these are all being classed in typical fashion as disinformation. Now, the claims themselves are actually fictitious warrants when there is unnamed European authorities involved. Now, fake Facebook pages have all amplified the disinformation, but there is no credible evidence or official documentation which supports these claims. As I said, these are fictitious warrants, and the European authority cited, well, are unnamed, so it just says something happened somewhere. In any case, this isn't actually the first form of political disinformation centered around ANC figures going around at the moment, with Julius Malema also having recently been featured, of which I actually did a YouTube short on this. So ladies and gentlemen, all I really got to say to you is around this form of disinformation, just be careful of these AI-generated videos that have forms of sensational headlines, because they're nothing more than clickbait. But Ramaphosa has not been falsely implicated in fabricated corruption stories. None of this has happened. Unfortunately, Mantashe and Cyril Ramaphosa are firmly in South Africa getting on with their jobs. In any case, let's actually move on to Trump's tariffs and the economic impact, because this is almost a story that we could cover every single day because it's constantly unfolding. So again, let us not forget that there is this 30% tariffs coming in on the 1st of August. And as a result of this, the economic impact constantly appears to be ramping up. Now, as of today, time of recording, the SA car exports to the US have now plummeted by over 80%. Now, the Reserve Bank governor has actually warned that up to 100,000 job losses could be incoming, mostly affecting sectors such as agriculture and the automobile industry. It also has specific risks to citrus, grapefruits, macadamias, wines, and even ostrich leather are all currently going to be affected. The citrus industry alone risks 35,000 jobs. So small towns, as I've said in other videos, are likely to be economically devastated. Mercedes-Benz South Africa is reportedly considering pulling out of East London full stop due to tariff impacts, which would risk making East London a ghost town. Now, we have heard from the Afrikaner delegation, this is Freedom From Plus, NISA and other organizations, who claim there were 4, possibly 5 preconditions to resume relations with the US, namely 1, prioritizing farmer tax, 2, renounce kill the Boer, 3, fair compensation for expropriation, 4, exempt US companies from BE, and this maybe 5th one, which is to restore the normal relations with Israel, although that's not really very official. But in any case, apparently, according to the South African government, they've had no formal confirmation of this from the White House on these preconditions. So you would expect that to actually all come via either their embassies or their special envoys, in which case, let's move on to the special envoys, namely that of Jonas. Now, I actually did a YouTube short around this. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. But this is basically the news that Jonas, the special envoy, has not been cleared to have credentials or a visa to go be a special envoy in the US. Now, according to the ANC, this is all hogwash and right-wing disinformation. Now, the actual party who gave this disinformation was actually the DA. But in any case, as Jonas was appointed the special envoy to the US, it's been very curious that whilst he's been appointed as this role, he's never been seen in Washington, ever. And so this has led to the allegations by the DA's Emma Powell that he was denied a diplomatic visa and the US rejected his credentials. Now, according to the ANC, that's impossible because the Americans don't actually have to approve his credentials. Now, Jonas had previously called Trump a racist and a narcissist, and this itself likely soured the relationships with the US. Because let's face it, this is what seems to happen with the ANC time and time again. They just seem to keep putting their foot in it. And there's no one really within the ANC now that isn't well tainted. According to the government, Jonas is still working for the Department of Trade and Industry and for DIRCO on trade negotiations. But I mean, if the guy's not actually being seen in the US, then one questions what work he's actually doing. Now, as I've said previously, the South African government seems to have a strategy, and the strategy is, okay, whilst the US is going to exit, fine, that's fine, we'll just pivot to China, China. Well, South Africa is currently in talks with 3 Chinese car makers, including Chery and BARC, to potentially focus on building assembly plants in South Africa, especially for their SUVs and their hybrid models. Now, according to the Minister of Trade, Minister Parks, this is to counter the USA traffic and to preserve the local automotive jobs industry. But you see, the problem is that on the whole, I can't really see why China would actually do that. China needs to be an export economy. They need to build things themselves. They've got a very big labor force that they actually need to keep employed. And so actually moving jobs when you need them yourself to countries like South Africa, not very productive countries that is, doesn't really make a lot of economic sense. This also coupled with the news that there are certain car manufacturers, Chinese state-owned car manufacturers at the moment, that are just not doing very well. These cars are all being sold almost at cost. The profit margins are very low. And so these car manufacturers are actually finding it a struggle to, well, actually make a car that they can sell at a profit. And so these brands are, well, struggling. Now, there are currently 16 Chinese car brands in South Africa, 6 entered in 2024 alone. And of those, only BARC actually has an operational assembly plant in South Africa. And I must re-highlight again, it's not profitable. It's really not profitable. So the government hopes to increase Chinese investment in order to offset their AGOA losses and maintain economic activity, specifically in the Eastern Cape, because the Eastern Cape is a car manufacturing hub. But the reality is that the likelihood of this happening to the same degree it happens with the Americans is like non-existent. And yet again, what we're actually seeing here is a government that doesn't understand economic models and seems to think that if they abide by the usual ideological trade centers, well, we closely aligned with communism, with China, therefore we will be fine. We'll work together and we'll have the same economic benefits. And that is just retarded. In any case, moving on to proper retarded, you will recall the issue with SAPS. Now, Ramaphosa placed the police minister on special leave after explosive claims by the KZN police commissioner of political interference and organized crime infiltration. Now, the police minister was allegedly linked to drug cartel figures and corrupt individuals, and then he was ultimately placed on special leave with a new individual due to take over. Now, that individual is currently a professor at the University of Wits, and as a result, he's due to retire or resign or leave that job on the 31st of July, which means he's only available to actually take the job from the 1st of August. Now, in the intervening period, Gwede Matashe, Minister of Resources, has been appointed as the temporary acting police minister. Yep, you've heard it here first. You see, Gwede has definitely not been arrested internationally because he's actually now the acting police minister. Now, a judicial commission of inquiry will be led by a previous Constitutional Court judge, also due to retire, in order to investigate these claims. Now, in the intervening periods, the EFF has now disputed the legality of Ramaphosa's actions, saying the Constitution does not empower the president to place ministers on special leave. In other words, he shouldn't be doing this, he should just fire the minister, which obviously many individuals have suggested. But I suppose the counter principle to this is, would you really want to be a minister removed from your job with nothing more than allegations? Don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. In any case, the claim made by the EFF is that the appointment of this professor violates the separation of powers. Now, as you know from my video yesterday, according to the HSRC, public trust in SAPS is at an all-time low, and so really everybody's monitoring these developments with this whole police crisis very closely. And as a result of this, Cyril Ramaphosa has actually moved a little bit further in order to try to regain trust in his cabinet members. Don't know how successful he's going to be with this. And he has ordered all cabinet members, including himself, to undergo lifestyle audits. The process will be managed by the Director General and the Secretary of Cabinet. These lifestyle audits are going to be based on financial disclosures. Also remember, with financial disclosures, also means that you just don't disclose something and maybe no one will notice it. They will also have lifestyle investigation. What they'll do is they'll have a look at your disclosures, they'll have a look at your bank statement that you provide, for that one account that you want to show. And if the way that you live doesn't reflect your financial means, then and only then will they do some form of lifestyle investigation. A lot of this is really relying on a form of disclosure, and all lawyers know that really when it comes down to disclosure, you have to take that with a pinch of salt because people are not always that forthcoming. Now, there are legal limitations on the publications of the results, and so what you may actually have is that parties may be found as being, in breach of these lifestyle audits. So who knows, will they actually ever make the public environment? Don't know. But the Public Works Minister, D. McPherson, separately audited 400 high-risk officials in finance, ITC, and procurement, and we don't know what the results of those were. Previously, 48 senior managers were previously audited in 2022 and 2023. What were the results? Don't know. So apparently these individuals are going to have lifestyle audits in order to improve public trust. And what are the results of them going to be? So whether or not this actually has an impact, who knows? I think it's just more political posturing. It's nice to say that lifestyle audits will occur, but what's the actual outcome of that going to be? Well, probably nothing. And on to a very final news story. This is actually the news story of the first national dialogue on coalition governments. Now, it's important to understand that coalition governments have actually been highly problematic in South Africa ever since their inception, with the ANC losing its majority. And we've seen the outcomes of that in many municipalities that have actually had to adopt coalition government agreements. Now, the first national dialogue on coalition governments actually took place in early July 2025 at UCT's Graduate School of Business in Cape Town. It was convened by the Deputy President, the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, and also had a collaboration with the National Council of Provinces and South Africa's Local Government Association. So pretty much all the political guys. Now, the aim was to develop a framework to stabilize coalitions, especially ahead of the 2026 local government elections, because as we approach those local government elections, it's anticipated that coalition governance agreements are probably going to be the norm, with the ANC not getting majority anywhere. Now, this process is a part of a broader national reflection on how they're going to address political instability in coalition-run municipalities. Let us not forget, we've seen those instabilities in Tshwane, Nelson Mandela Bay, and Johannesburg. Now, the themes have included what is the minimal requirement for forming a coalition. Because as we've seen in, say, Joburg, where you get the smallest, like Al Jamal guy, ends up being mayor, even though he has 0 votes. Now, the idea behind this is to ensure that there is some form of greater transparency in the coalition government agreements, and it introduces an accountability mechanism to prevent power grabs and bribery, which we've seen with other political parties, such as what happened when Action SA kicked the DA out of Tshwane in order to take, mayor and speaker positions. So a wide range of stakeholders have participated. They've had political parties, civil society groups, academia, and local government leaders, and there's a growing consensus on the need for legislation. Now, the legislation is to prevent floor crossing, and what floor crossing is effectively those people that go, I don't want to work with the DA anymore, let me go work with the ANC, and then they collapse the whole coalition, and everybody moves across. Now, we've seen that quite a lot, as I say, Action SA and whoever else. Now, the idea is to introduce minimum voter thresholds. So if you're a political party too small, then you don't really get a say. So there will be like a minimum criteria. And this will obviously be highly critical to those political parties that are small. Now, it will also attempt to clarify the roles of executive mayors in coalition contexts. And again, as I said, this comes after you've had all these minnow party leaders like the Northern Front in PE, where they were running the municipality despite being a really, really small party. And you've had it in other areas around the country as well. Now, some opposition parties are accusing the ANC of trying to use the dialogue to cement its control over unstable metros by changing rules to its favor. And to that, I would say, no, that would never happen. The ANC is, hard, fast, and honest. But despite this, there is still cross-party agreement that unregulated coalitions are undermining service delivery around the country and public trust. And again, all you got to do is see the collapse in many coalition-run governance areas to know that this is kind of true. Now, this national dialogue on coalition governments will feed into a white paper process expected to culminate in a proposed constitutional amendment or legislative changes by mid-2026. And what this does do is it actually gives us a preview or a prelude to potentially what the national dialogue could result in when it actually kicks off. So if this is any indicator, what we could see is a lot of these type of things feeding into the national dialogue, leading to either constitutional or legislative changes, and make of that what you will. In any case, that's the news of today. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments section below. Until tomorrow, bye.